the 2004 LTP. I'll hand over to you. That's my hard job done.
Welcome, Madeline. Great to have you here in your hands.
Thank you, Morena koutou. So I'm happy to take the report as read, basically. The report, obviously, as Kath said, presents the half-year reports for the organisation's performance measures. And as Kath said, this is the first time the measures have been reported on since being adopted in the 24-34 LTP, and it provides an opportunity to check in on how the performance measures are tracking before the annual report.
Thank you for that, Madeline. Right, do we have questions? It's a fulsome report. Yes, Martin.
Good morning. So on page 24 under libraries, so we have it's a new measure, and total number of visitors in person and online is increased, and the new measure is 300,000 baseline. So I guess two questions. How was that 300,000 baseline figure arrived at? And second question is, I'm assuming the visitors, so that's picked up through the pedestrian count meters at the library, and then some IT stuff about how many people online?
I'd answer that. Glenn may wish to pitch in. So in terms of your first question, the baseline, my understanding is that was based on previous performance. So they've taken that figure, what they received, a number of visitors they received the previous year, and applied that as a baseline. So the target reflects that we should be maintaining that number, or ideally moving up over time. In terms of your second question, I can't provide the detail on the exact measures. There is a combination of measures used to capture that information. Glenn, do you have any more info you'd like to add?
Through the chair, the in-person I can confirm is door count, which undercounts a little because large groups of people get counted as one person. The online year would be some IT measure around counting visits to site.
Thank you.
Rika.
Thank you. Yes, I just have one small, it's a comment really, and I think it's important for clarity. On page 23, we talk about airfields, and I'm not sure that there's a real understanding in our community around whether council owns our airfield or whether it's privately owned. And we say at the bottom there on page 23, other wards, Coromandel, Koivu, Whangatai and Mercury Bay, do not have airfields. And I wondered whether we could talk about council owned or council funded airfields, just for clarity.
Through the chair, yeah, absolutely. That makes perfect sense, and we will action that. Thank you.
Thanks, Rika. Yeah, Peter.
Me?
Yep.
Page 45. So we'll promote the efficient and sustainable use of water. It just continues to trouble me that we have such, in my view, appalling stats related to water loss. And I was wondering, where my thinking went is I was wanting to know what the value of that water loss was. So I'm assuming that what we're talking about here is treated water, and we would know how much it costs to treat water. And if we are consistently losing, those percentages, a third of our treated water, then we can actually quantify the real loss. And it might become something useful for ratepayers to know and understand that actually, because there's a leak in the footpath that you haven't reported, or because of whatever, that the impact on our district is actually we're pouring $3 million down the drain, or whatever the number is. So I'd be keen to see that quantified in dollar terms, please.
Through the chair, ordinarily I'd ask our Group Manager of Infrastructure to provide any insights to that. He's not here today, I don't believe, unless he's online, but we will follow up with him and see what sort of information we can get there.
Thank you. Through the chair. Good morning. My question is around the actual production of a 6-monthly report. I know that we're required to do an annual report. There's obviously a heck of a lot of work that goes into doing this. And then I look at quite a few things where the measurements actually haven't been done yet, or surveys are to be completed. And I just wonder whether it's worth all of the effort that goes into doing a 6-monthly one. So I know that's a sort of loaded question, isn't it? It's really more designed to get debate around the table, I think, but just something I think is worthy of some discussion.
Thank you, John. No, it's stimulating. What do folk feel?
Mr. Chair, just before the debate,
sorry,
just for some background, this is the first year we've moved to 6-monthly. We used to do quarterly. So we have halved it and halved the workload for that reason. And I think, looking at Leslie, this is the first year, right, that we're doing half. Yeah, just yes or no. Yeah. Yes. So just before the debate happens, we have just halved it.
Okay, so we've halved the cost, John, if you're worried about cost.
Well, could have gone the whole way, couldn't we?
Well, I think it's interesting what's I'd like into the debate, not because I disagree with John, but actually I think we need to recognise that we don't have the bottom line of a profit. I mean, we have the bottom line of making sure we're sustainable and we do it, we cover our costs. But actually, probably our bottom line is do we provide to the community what we're committed to through our long-term plan? And it would be odd if you only reviewed that once a year, I would have thought. The question is this sufficiently either timely or sufficient to enable you to adjust your settings if you've seen a result that you don't like? That's probably the critical question. So I'll leave that as a question, John. I've got I think Gally first, and then you'll be entitled to reply.
I totally agree with what John has said, and I think it's really good that it's gone to 6-monthly. And whilst, true confessions, I skim over quite a few things and go, yeah, that looks good, that looks good. It is those nuggets, like my colleague here has just highlighted our attention to, that are really worthwhile scheduling either for a discussion or scheduling a report or whatever to come back to council. So I think for me, I get a lot of confidence, I get an overview of things, but then also there are some alerts, and it might only be that one thing like the water loss that is that nugget that we need brought to light for us to focus our attention on. So what I'm saying is, thank you. I think 6-monthly, we could probably, whoever the new council is next year, can always review how often does it need to go back to quarterly or be annual.
Thank you, Kelly. John.
Yeah, I just really wanted to respond to your comments in regard to our responsibility to do this, and I totally agree with that, of course, and I believe that every single council meeting we are really looking at our performance to our LTP. We should be digesting that, and I would be very supportive of having a more formal process where we as a council or as a risk and assurance actually look at a structure of how we're going on this, but producing a formal 6-monthly report that has maybe a third of the measures not yet measured, and the ability for people to be able to look at some of the things and interpret them to say, well, you haven't done this yet. Well, we didn't really plan to, because it's actually in the second 6 months that we're going to do it. I really have read it, and I love these things personally because it sort of informs me and goes to the point of reminding me of some of the things that probably I need to be focusing myself on. But I just wonder whether the value is there from amount of effort that the council puts in, and I'd be probably quite happy to hear from the chief executive as to what her views are around it as well.
Excuse me. I probably don't have a single view. I have some thoughts though, and I think from a governance perspective, as governors, you need to see this because these are the measures in the long-term plan that is our contract with our community about what are the things we're going to deliver. So as governors, you need to know how we're tracking. Does it need to be in this form? Potentially it could be in other forms. From the audit perspective, and audit is pretty important to us, and falling foul of audit is not a good thing to do because that is sort of an existential risk. Having a 6-monthly and even a quarterly report where we make sure we're measuring the right things, we've got the right data coming in, and we're actually compliant, makes that end of year audit a lot more simple. It'd be bad to get to the end of the year and find we've been monitoring the wrong thing and the wrong method and getting the wrong piece of data, because that's when you leads to qualifications on your annual reports and so on. If I could digress a little bit further based on my sort of time in a CE chair, the legislation and those that draft it and those that administer it believe the LTP is hugely important for our community because that's how they measure us and keep tabs on us. We know that's not the reality. The councillor interest in the RFS, for example, as a group of councillors, you've been really interested in how we're turning around those RFSs and how quickly we're responding to our community and so on. You're probably not that interested in some of these mandatory measures that measure the things that DIA are interested in, and some of our community probably aren't that interested in them either. So I do think we have a disconnect in the legislation between what central government thinks is important and what we get audited on versus the reality of what elected members think are important and our community think are important. However, that's what the legislation says, and that's what we're doing. Our job is to try and make this stuff as community consumable as possible, but that's quite challenging when you have things like mandatory measures. And sorry to be taking a bit of time about this. I think the last thing is we should always be checking our actual measures and have we got them right. The ones that aren't mandatory, have we got them right? These are new ones, so this is our first time we're reporting them, so there's potentially a bedding in process to understand, are we collecting the right data? Are we doing it right? Does it meet the need? And if it doesn't, let's change it, which is probably an LTP. Yeah. Sorry, that doesn't probably give you a view, but probably multiple.
No, that was very helpful. Thank you. You know, and in my mind, I'm sort of formulating that I'd see an opportunity within risk assurance. We meet 4 times a year, isn't it? Yeah. For us to have a structure within our own meeting that where we actually look at all the key aspects of the LTP, which would provide that ability then to be able to influence or look at it from a governance aspect. But I thank you for the efforts, and it was helpful for me personally. I just wonder whether it is publicly too worthwhile.
Terry, Brian has got another comment, so I might, because given we're in this part of the conversation, I'll perhaps let Brian go first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The other thing I just noted having a quick look through is that this is, as Aileen touched on, a little bit different because a lot of those measures that haven't been measured yet, you've said, potentially a third, a lot of those relate to the perception survey, which is a new thing that came in late in the LTP through audit, and we are establishing that. And so this half yearly report, so next year, actually will have that data filled in because we are surveying quarterly. And so it's only because it hasn't, it's initial stages that this half yearly report has a lot of info that says not applicable, but that will be filled in the half yearly report in future years.
Thank you. Terry.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the report. I have watched these for quite a few years and seen the discussion around them. And obviously, yes, some feel that they weren't really of any value, but I've always valued them. And I like the idea of you bringing some new ones in. I think they're really important that you've included those. I'm really, like Aileen says, the RFSs and the surveys were always my key gauge on what was going on. I see some of the surveys, designing, commissioning them or something in some stage. So when will they come out? Have you got any idea when they would be hit the people?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, this is what I was just touching on. So we've undertaken the first round this year because we had to initiate it. We'll be doing three lots. In the future, it will be a quarterly sample. We're using, we briefed, I think we're using Key Research, who do a lot of other councils. We're following their formula. And so the first time you may see this year's data will be in the final report. I mean, we could potentially in a workshop bring you some of the draft stuff, but given it's the first year, but then from then on, we will be having quarterly kind of results. So I think January was the first time we went out to, or the first round of surveying the public on our core services.
Right. Okay, so it takes some time to sort that out. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Any other questions or comments for the team here? Well, thank you, John, for stimulating some discussion. And I think what we know is we need to be making certain from a governance perspective, we can drive some value out of this. Peter, you already helped, amongst other things, by the very interesting question, what's the economic cost? Even what's the financial cost of what we're losing? Which, you know, even if it was quite frankly back of an envelope, would still be a very valuable, number. And that's the sort of thing I talk about, actually. If this is off track, and I mean, you're arguing, Peter, it is off track. The question becomes, can we do anything about it? Should we be doing something more structurally through our plans, whatever it is? So that's helpful. And John, I'm very open to your idea about better monitoring of the LTP, particularly if appropriate through this committee. I have a particular interest in the financial strategy and our sustainability. I say that for every council, but I think that's an important part as we go forward. Worth looking at, and perhaps I should help try and provide a little bit of support around thinking on that. Okay, if there's no other questions at this stage, perhaps we could move to the resolution, which is that we receive the report, which again seems a very small motion relative to the effort put in. Thank you, John. Thank you, Robin. Is any discussion on the motion? No, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, you guys. Appreciate that. Madeline, welcome to the job. Nice to have you here. Look forward to seeing you again. Yep.
10, so I'll leave temporarily if that's all right.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that for being here, Lee.
Thank you.
Righto, Paku, this is your song and dance through the various reports. So welcome to the meeting and thank you for your effort because, you know, a fair chunk of the open, particularly the open stuff is your good work. So first up, we're in your hands to lead us off, please, Paku. And Peter, welcome to the meeting too.
Segue from the last discussion around each of their information that we've got precise and accurate information, that the information is reviewed and that it's up to date. In addition to that, our service levels, that they're clear, concise, measurable and applicable. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. If you've got any questions around that bow tie risk assessment, be welcomed.
Right. Okay, so we all were to turn to page 53, and indeed the important bit on page 54 as well. We have the sense of the bow tie. So we've got yes, comments, questions folk would like to raise about this. This is the important part about working through Well, I mean, let's look at the centre one, the risk event, which is that the LTP and the plan or the annual plan deliverables are not met, service levels are not adequately maintained as a result of our financial strategy not being adhered to in relation to the financial decisions, financial management. So in other words, we're doing something that's running down the place. Okay, or we're not, perhaps put positively, we're not actually delivering what we really want to do because we are making decisions or we aren't adhering to our strategy that we've set ourselves. So that's not a bad sort of point for a group of governments to be worried about. Okay, so the question becomes, and I hear what you're saying, is if I was to flick the page, Paku and Peter, there are some improvements that you've identified. I mean, these aren't well, they are controls, but I mean, you're actually saying as a result of doing this work, there is new information or different information that you feel would be valuable, both obviously for ELT management, but also for governors to see. Is that correct?
Thank you. Yes. So through this, we've identified, as you can see on page 53, some of those pre-event mitigations, controls, processes for council and staff to be following, and we've also identified possibly some gaps that some additional process or controls can help address to ensure that we are sticking to the objectives we've set out in that financial strategy.
Okay, and the important thing actually is even right at the top of page 53, which is that effectively it says, I mean, it's emission's the wrong word, but I mean, we've got an orange there and amber. I don't know quite what all the colours we could have are, but it's not green, which I think is the desirable, which actually reflects that at this point, we're acknowledging that we have a risk around essentially probably reporting on our strategy, and therefore are we in line, is a bit higher than we want to be. We want to do some stuff, the stuff that you're talking about, to reduce the level of risk, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so I think it's an important point I'm trying to make to the committee is that we're saying we're not in a position we want to be in. And when we're not in a position we want to be in, we actually are running some risks underneath it in terms of our financial strategy. That might not resonate, that might raise questions, guys. You got questions?
Yeah, I've got some questions.
Sure.
Yeah. There's I read this, a bit of a surprise, quite honestly. I didn't know we were sort of having issues around this to this depth. Do you feel that it's you've got some mitigation or some things there to do to change things or give us better information around the financial management? Can you give us some examples of where we're really failing?
So if we just take the first one as an example, our current decision report around out of cycle expenditure requests, they do have consideration of the financial impact of that decision, where we're maybe not providing the same or appropriate visibility is when we take all of those reports throughout the year, are we aware of the, I guess, total extent of potential departure from the plan that has been set through the LTP? And so that's where we want to try and provide a bit of a longer term view in the information that we're providing to you.
So when you set the rates for the year and you've got the plan, if we start to muck around with it, when we're rating for people and not spending it or overspending, that has an implication, obviously, on how the rates are spent and how they're gathered.
And I think it's, I guess, important to recognise it's the cumulative effect of a number of decisions.
Right.
So one individual decision isn't necessarily the problem.
Yeah.
But adding 5 or 10 of them might be.
Right.
I like that idea, Peter, because it actually raises the eyesight of governance to the strategy rather than, dare I say it, down on the weeds. It's actually strategically, what's the impact of the decisions we're actually making? And your point is well made, cumulatively, what is the impact of the decisions that we're making over time? Because it's quite valid to make decisions. You just need to be able to pin it against where you actually really want to be. Agreed.
So just another supplementary, is that right?
Go for it. Yep.
So what stage are we at? Are you feeling that we're at a stage where this is just creeping in, or we're at a stage where it's an issue that we need to address?
I think it's, I guess, always something the council needs to be mindful of. I don't think, from what we've seen, we aren't And as far as the control measures, our prudence benchmarks aren't significantly away from where they need to be. So there isn't a problem today.
Mhm.
But what we've identified is we maybe don't have enough in our control space to ensure that in the future we don't get into a problem situation.
Right.
So perhaps if I can quite, Terry, this is about being better,
Yeah.
not necessarily about.
Yeah,
that we're
being
bad,
better,
we-
yeah.
We've got to become something.
Yeah.
I think it's actually about being better. Ellie, I think you had a point or a question.
Yeah, I don't want to tread into operational, the operational sphere, but we have our risk and assurance meetings, and these reports are really valuable, and the work that you and Paku and everybody does is really amazing. What is the mechanism just in our day-to-day business of doing the business of council, not in the risk and assurance committee setting, where staff may feel empowered to, through the CE, to say, I've looked at this audit paper, I've looked at whatever, I would like to speak to a risk associated with the decision that the council are going to make today. Do you get my gist? So if they see something, like Peter, you're highlighting that if we make certain decisions, it might be that we put the rates up to 10% or whatever. Is there that opportunity for staff in our day-to-day business, BAU, to be able to say, I would like to flag a risk today with this report? I mean, we do have those risk boxes, but I'm just thinking from like a CFO point of view or did that make sense? Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you.
so I'll try and answer that. As far as the day-to-day business of staff, that's I think where the policy settings come in around. This is I think much more Paku's area around how procurements happen, procurement planning. If we're talking about what information comes to council, we do have review processes for all of the reports, which will ensure appropriate involvement of the finance team or others if there is a need for that.
Okay. So you feel comfortable that the right risk messaging is getting through to us so that we don't, for example, get an amber, we wait 4 months for a risk and assurance meeting and we've stuffed something up along the way.
Through the chair, in addition to our ISO risk framework allows for escalation points in terms of staff. So if they've got an issue, they can escalate it through our escalation process in terms of risk. So it would be, if they've got concern, they would raise it with their manager, who would then raise it with me as the risk manager, whether it goes on the corporate risk, and then ideally, discuss that with one of the senior leadership team members. So yes, there are avenues for that.
I suppose I'm just worried about governance making mistakes that then make your jobs a lot harder and increase our risks. So I'm confident in the team. I just wanted to make sure you felt that you had all the right mechanisms to get through to us.
Yes, we've got those.
Okay.
In the interest of full disclosure, there is one area that does concern particularly the senior leadership team, and that is the number of agendas we sign off in any 6 week period. So we have 5 community boards, we have council, we have risk and assurance. And while we have inbuilt measures in there where they have to go past finance and so on, the reality of it is that there's a lot of stuff coming past us and coming past not that many of us that would pick up on these sort of risk matters. And it does tend to be the community board papers where balls are dropped, where things are missed, and potentially the advice isn't as robust as it could be. So, yeah, that's just full disclosure.
Yeah. So I want to dig a little bit into the capital works program. So that's part of this financial strategy where a lot of that input, we don't really get involved with selection of those projects in a way that they impact the business. But if we don't produce the goods in the time frame that we do it, it must also affect the financial strategy. And that would have a big impact on what you're trying to say.
Yes, so as far as the capital delivery, you'll see in that first column there are a number of areas, and that's really that speak to the asset renewal program, and that the, I guess, risk scenario there is really in relation to we aren't maintaining our assets appropriately or not funding them appropriately, and that would result in substantial either rate requirements in the future or additional debt beyond what council has provided for in the strategy.
So that's depreciation you're talking about? That we're not
Renewal
putting
fund.
money aside so those assets can be renewed when they come up for cycle?
Yes, or doing enough work so that we maintain an appropriate renewal profile. So maintain the assets to an appropriate standard.
Right.
That's where a number of things could be connected.
Yeah.
So you take the report that we have just adopted, the half yearly performance report, and the interesting discussion around the target. Oh, sorry, I think I might be talking about an audit issue. The target that we have for resales. So actually the critical question is, strategic question is, does that relate to the asset management plans? Number one. Do we have the funding in place, which is part of our financial strategy, and have we done it? Sorry, and have we got the, because you've already mentioned, have we got the right procurement processes in place that ensure that we do that efficiently and effectively? And therefore, have we maintained our financial strategy? Those are the linkages that we need to draw to keep ourselves at that strategic level. Are we achieving what we have set out to do? And those are that's, John, it's reflecting back. I'm not, I'll pick on you, but I want to come back to the, I don't want to lose the point that you raised in our previous item. Those are the real questions as governors we need to be happy, we need to be satisfied about. Difficult to do, but it's actually what we should be doing. Okay, any other questions or comments from folks? Peter?
Yep. Hey, I was surprised to see number 6, so we're talking about the table on page 53, that not fully funding depreciation. I thought, I know we deferred some depreciation and some, but I thought we were in a situation now where we were just following the process with depreciation and fully funding.
Yes, I guess just as far as the bow tie, these are potential contributors, and it's not necessarily saying that this is a situation we're facing, but it's one that we may face.
The idea of the bow tie, Peter, is the left-hand column says if this occurs, the risk in the middle will happen, and the right-hand columns say this is the impact. So the critical thing about the left-hand columns is what are our controls that prevent that happening, prevent controls. And look, logically for that, your funding your depreciation is an annual plan LTP discussion. And then obviously clearly delivery as a result through your financials. So the question that becomes is, you could write that, dare I say, for local government. But the critical question is, do we have the right annual plan process where indeed we have a control that has that ongoing on-site over, are we properly funding all our expenditure, but including depreciation? So, I mean, my assumption is, that the way I see some bow ties, there will be probably quite a list under each column about the controls that actually do exist. Because in the long run, Parky, that's what I'd like to know from you. Yes. With your assurance hat on, yep. We actually have those controls operating.
Yeah, and through the chair, that's correct. I mean, the pre-event mitigations, that speaks to all of those questions. So, yeah, that you've got.
Brilliant. Yes, John?
Oh, just a comment, I look at this and I look at the right-hand column of the consequences and always work back from those from a governance perspective, because, it then sort of resonates as to why we've seen previous blips in things and what were the drivers, and now are they covered within the way that you've described things on the left-hand columns. So we've just been through a couple of years of fairly significant rate rises driven by events completely really out of our control in regard to the cost of raw materials, the rise in valuations on items. And just as an observation, I just look at those to see where the parallels are that are sort of being drawn. And, there are always a number of things that become out of our control, particularly from a central government point of view of what's thrown at us in regard to changes and regulations and requirements and being able to cope. So, I'm just sort of trying to, when I see something like that, and I understand the left hand is supposed to be capturing those sort of things, do you feel that really we are in the most significant areas that impact on our end result, the right-hand side, that there are just so many that are unknown factors that are just about impossible to try and have a remedy for? Or am I just being too negative in my outlook?
Look, through the chair, we do have a boat high risk assessment for central government reforms. So whilst it might not be put through with this boat high risk assessment, that's something that we keep an eye on, and that's certainly one that we will be talking about in terms of, those pressures, I guess.
Robin, Aileen has got a point she'd like to make, and I'm not having to, in this matter. So.
Just want to say, do you in response to Councillor Grant, do you think there should be a number 11 that says external forces?
Well, I guess that's sort of where I was coming from, because if you look at the things that have really caught us and historically caught us, they have all been way out of our control, and then we've had to try and do the work and catch up with it. And what's on the current horizon at the moment is the changes in the waters, which is a radical change. Is the speculation or talk about consolidation of territorial authorities. Those are things that are happening that we have ability to input into, but generally at a stage when it's all over and done with, and it has so much impact on us.
I think the little contribution I was going to make before I invite Robin to raise a question would be in terms, I tend to think in terms of controls here, John, of what you're saying. This raises the question, a control would be, what's the quality of our forecasting? So it's one thing to have our budget, but actually my presumption would be that in terms of controls, probably at a quarterly point, you wouldn't go too much more. You could make an argument about the first quarter's a wee bit irrelevant. Do we reforecast? Which would take into account at least what we know. It can be a bit hard to what is it? I'm going to be Donald Rumsfeld, isn't it? Unknown unknowns. But are we forecasting the impact of things that are starting to influence us in terms of where we're going with our budgets? A classic case was for another council. The cost of reseals is big in my life if you live inside a raiding county. The cost of reseals meant that every year we were going back a third in what we could do. Now, you want to know that early, not at the end of the period. So it becomes questions in terms of control. What are we doing internally around that around the forecasting or reforecasting, so that we can take the base of our annual plan, but also be able to keep it relevant by actually what are the influences that are coming in. That doesn't happen every year, but it can influence it, and those are the sorts of things you need to do. So I'm not asking you to tell us about the forecasting, but it does make me wonder, looking at this, Paku, there's a lot. This is what I'm saying. We're not bad, but we could do better, I think, is the point that we're trying to make here. I don't know if I know all the controls that we have in place that mitigate or reduce the raw risk, and that's perhaps would be the interesting thing to know, that might sit there and give us all a bit of confidence. So can I just ask you guys to reflect on that? I'm not asking for it at the moment, but that would be the way I would wonder about this. Robin, you've been very patient. Sorry.
No worries. I suspect that this might get parked for another time, but just looking at that left-hand column of the
contributing factors, and one of the contributing factors is not fully funding depreciation, leading to inability to fund. And I know that some community boards, for example, Thames Community Board was gifted some sculptures, and we chose not to depreciate those sculptures because it's an unfair burden on the ratepayer. It's a gift. Once the gift is run out, we're not going to replace them. And I did just wonder if this is ranked number 7 because it's lower in the risk profile, or whether there were other decisions that had been made by previous councils or previous community boards that will impact our ability to fund future projects that we're unaware of, and whether we had any governance oversight on the quantity of that particular risk. But I do appreciate that it's quite a big question with no prior warning, and so it might have to be something that's parked and come back to later. But I did want to flag it because I think as I'm worried that those decisions have been made and we have no oversight over them.
There's no, just to comment, there's no, so 1 to 10, there's no pecking order around those. So
that's good to know. Thank you very much.
Yes, Ali.
Yeah, just a comment from me, and this is just a gut feeling, is that there'll be some odd bits and pieces, things where there's been decisions to not depreciate or depreciate not fully and so on specific items. But I think where this is coming from is really the really big stuff, which is around your revaluation of assets. When we suddenly find our water assets are worth a third more than we thought they were, then that drives a whole load of expenditure that we actually haven't had tucked away for the renewal side of it. So I think that is probably far more significant than any one-off small decisions around specific
exit. So I can be assured that it has been identified in this risk assessment and you're aware of the potential for that risk.
I'm going to refer that to Donna.
And also, and a part with that is looking at it from a governance perspective. We have the reporting, which are the balanced budget reports, and that other report, which the name eludes me of now, but it's the depreciation report. That's what overall you will see that we are complying, that we're within the limits of that. And I think those are there for the reason for you to be able to see that overall view, rather than looking down into the detailed, one-off things. Like if there was something, that pops out, you would see on the monthly financial reporting, there's tables at the back that say whether we're breaching any of our limits or not as well. So you would see some of that stuff come out in there.
Well, thank you. I'm just conscious of Terry.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think this is really important discussion. I'm really get engaged with this. One of the things is oversight, and we have little oversight really. And just what Chair Bruce says is that over car park resales, we got no idea when they're done, how they're done, time limits are done, whether the money's at the bank or not in the bank. So we rely on staff coming forward telling us. And then we get situations like national policy statements come down, what John's saying, they come from the government. We just got to address those and deal with them. So there's a lot of stuff that comes through that it's very hard to plan for unless we're told really clear in advance of the budget setting. So we rely on staff really for that big project stuff in the LTP to be able to give us some clear guidance on that. And then if that changed, what's the impact? Like we've seen Whakakatāi drop 50% of their funding on footpaths and lights and all that kind of stuff. It's very hard to rejig all that stuff if we don't know in advance. So getting this right at the start is really important.
It places emphasis on the budgeting control. So that's in the forecasting control, which is really good. Look, we're not going to resolve anything particularly about this, but other than to reflect, Paku, that hopefully you've received some helpful comments around, it's clearly a strategic risk. There is a broader sense that we might want to talk a bit more about this at this committee from a monitoring perspective. But I hope those comments give you some sense about the seriousness with which we take it, but also clearly a desire that we understand the controls, number one, and that we get some improvements in the way that you're planning, Peter, which is tremendous, because we want to be at yellow at the very least, if not green. Okay, I'm just conscious of time. I think it might be useful if we move on. So unless there was any other questions around the risk report or comments you'd like to make at this stage, Paku, could I move to the resolution? Is there any more points you want to make?
No, that's it.
That's okay.
Yep.
So do I have a person? Thank you, Dally. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Terry. So we'll put the motion that we receive the report. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. We do the insurance report, please, Paki.
Through the chair, I take the report as read. The main discussion point I want to have here is around the integrity review that we undertook. There are two particular risks here, and that's around us being a publicly funded organisation, reputational risk and financial risk. So our audits, and I've said this before, we take an audit-based approach to undertaking those reviews. And in this case, it started with a risk workshop back in 2023. And we used that as the basis for looking into specific areas of interest. So the areas that we identified through that review were payroll, procurement and contract management, use of council's assets for personal gain potential, and disposal of plant. So those were the key areas we looked at. The report, as I said, the summary is there were some processes and practices that there was some sample testing that we did, and in terms of fraud risk, we didn't find anything that alarmed us, or that we didn't find anything at all. So that's a good sign. So that's in terms of sample testing. In terms of looking at our policies from the perspective of, are they supporting the idea around us being a public organisation? We found that there were areas that we could improve on those policies, make them sharper in terms of making sure that we give the right guidance. And we found two IT systems where we could basically improve their functionality. Yeah, I think that's really it. There's several findings in here, specific findings, and I think once those findings have been, the recommendations have been implemented, I think that we can bring this risk down. But at this point in time, given the types of risks we're talking about, we put that as a high rating. Are there any questions around that review?
Thank you, Paki. Yes, Dally.
Looking at systems such as payroll and some of that IT, there will obviously be a cost associated around upgrading that. So if that is something that is deemed necessary, that will come as a report for an out of cycle budget request, or I'm just wondering how that might work given our tight rating.
Through the chair, I can answer that. So from the way that our IT program works is that there's prioritization done as far as, we list all the things that comes to the leadership team. We then decide what's a priority. Given that this has popped up, I mean, this is on the list. It's been on our priority list, but it's been a bit lower down. We're yet to have a discussion at the leadership team level of where within those priorities some of these things should fit. So that's how it would get bumped up, not necessarily more money, because there is a sum of money for our IT program, and it would be what gets it first, kind of, is something that we look at as at an operational level. But yes, of course, if it was something big and that pot of money wasn't big enough, yeah, we would need to have a discussion about that at the council level.
And to reinforce a good risk discussion here, you've said, we've heard from Paki, our assurance man, that this is considered currently high risk. I assume that will influence management's position because if we're risk-based in our decision making, or risk influenced in decision making, that will have an influence. Thank you for that, Ellie. That's good. Any other questions? Paki, I want to just I went back to check actually as you were speaking. you are saying that during the review of the process and practices, this is the first bullet point, the systems used in our financial transactions sample testing, we did not identify any fraudulent activity or any obvious areas where fraud could be committed. Okay, so that's an important conclusion that I, as a chair, latch onto. Not out of faith, but actually, I'm keen to hear that's the whole point of it. You've given us a very important conclusion that on the whole integrity is not so bad. The point being, we can be better, but we need to do that. But we need to do these things. They are obvious holes that are inside our organisation, correct?
Yes, correct.
But that's more a statement, isn't it, that I'm making rather than asking you a question. But I just want to clarify. Terry?
Paku, I just see the CoLab contract review has been completed. You've got down there completed on page 58.
Yes, that's correct.
What's the outcome of that? Have we seen?
Yes, I provided a summary back in
a while ago.
Yes, a wee while ago.
Okay.
With regards to that.
Okay, I must have missed that, but we continue with that.
Yeah, no, I certainly remember the CoLab coming. Terry.
Right.
Yeah, it was probably a couple of meetings ago at the very least.
Just want to know if we're still with them.
Perhaps
Councillor Walker, I can send you a copy of that.
I'm going to say perhaps outside the meeting you could let Terry know the
summary
outcome
from that.
Okay. Any other comments folk would like to make at this stage? Okay, can we move to the resolution, please? Then thank you, Paku. Again, as I say, as a chair, I am very grateful that you've done that integrity review with the comprehensiveness of it's done, and I'm sure it'll be of interest to Carol and Anton as well as our auditors. So look, the recommendations we received, the assurance report. Thank you, Rika. Thank you, Martin. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you. Paku, the health and safety, please.
Through the chair, I take the health and safety report as being read. We're excited that the Damstra safety information tool is now well underway, and we're looking to implement that in March now. And so we're in the final stages of launching that particular system. It will drive a lot of our work programs for the next year. We've been aligning, in this report, you'll see that we've been aligning our processes for that launch. Examples of walking talks, ergonomic catch-ups, toolbox talks. So, and also we've been developing our training around support for that implementation of Damstra. In regards to incident reporting, just want to highlight a couple of things. The electric vehicles, it's really interesting around the fact that they do perform differently to a normal petrol car. And so we have a situation where we've noticed that the speeding numbers are up on those particular vehicles. And really, that's around the actual noise levels of the engine. You're not aware of that. I'm taking people know about this, and of course the pickup is pretty quick. So we've gone back and we've reviewed our training around people using electric cars. Also, just in terms of our incident reporting, I just want to. We have had some concern around maybe staff are under-reporting, and that's primarily around our tool not being that user-friendly in terms of noting incidents, in particular near-miss incidents. So there's a caution around that, in that once we have our Damstra tool in place, you might see our incidents rise. So I just want to caution you about that. We are making it really easy for our staff to put incidents in through their telephone, through their mobile phones. So it is going to be easier, and so we are pushing that they register all of the incidents. Any questions?
Thanks, Paku. Peter.
I just have a question around the personal confrontation. At our last meeting, and I think we've got it in the minutes there on page 7, that it's going to be a separate report brought to us around personal confrontation.
Yes.
I'd like to understand where that's at.
Yeah, so that'll be provided at the next Risk and Assurance Committee meeting. We are undertaking the actual bow tie risk assessment associated with that. So we'll be reporting on that back through to you. Yeah, at the next meeting.
Jerry?
Here's my question, Paku, is around the CCTV cameras and setup of that. How's that going, and how's the rollouts going?
Yeah, that's going okay. We've got Thames and Coromandel down, and of course it's the other offices as the program of work allows for that to happen. Yeah.
And the action bit of like this, the beneficial in terms of noticing the cameras are there, that the attitudes change, or is it, what's the effect?
It's quite difficult to substantiate. So, to be honest, we haven't seen a decrease in the number of people coming in and, having a go at our staff. But it's certainly something that we'll track and give you some feedback on at some point. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments I could like to have? Look, thank you, Peter, for raising the personal confrontation and also the warning of Dempster. If it's a more easily accessible tool, we might find an increase. I'm always concerned that we might, staff might normalise the wrong behaviour. In other words, they just accept it's part of the job, and we can't afford that luxury for our staff. So I'll be very interested to see where that gets you to, that we do the best we can to encourage people to report so that we can actually deal with these things properly. Be great to know. Okay, can we move to the resolution, please, which is that we receive Treasury's report. And I can thank you to the team too behind it that do the work. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Dali. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Right, thank you for that, Paku. I think we can relieve you of duties and ask that Hayden, if you could come up, please, and Treasury report. And given we've been talking about strategy and financial strategy, here goes another report that's an insight to the funding cycle that we have on one side of our balance sheets. So, in your hands, Hayden.
Through the chair, I'll take the report as read. Just some probably key highlights with Treasury. Our debt still sits at 91 million, sorry, and of that 10 million is for pre-funding of April 25 maturing debt. Probably the biggest area within the Treasury function that we're looking at the moment is our interest rate risk management. So we're at sort of minimums there. There's a graph on one of the pages which shows that we're slightly out, but we're actually on. I checked with Brett and it's...
Oh, so we're on? Sorry, I was thinking you're getting...
It came up last time.
Brilliant.
He said that it's they've just got to try and get the line to sort of follow the other line, and they're kind of working on it. But we are compliant. So probably the biggest one is that we've been waiting for the US, the markets in the US to sort of calm down, well, sort of settle after the change in president. The interest rates spiked a bit. So yeah, we're meeting with PwC this afternoon actually to kind of work out what's the best sort of interest rate strategy to maintain compliance.
Did you buy some gold?
No,
we bought crypto. Yeah. Okay. No, thank you. Oh, look, that was actually my only question was, again, this has been a pretty accurate sort of report, and there was a little white. Now, just for clarity, folks, that's if you go to the, what page that I'm on, if you go to the Treasury Summary Positions and Compliance, right, I don't think I've got the page in the agenda, it's the third title page, the graph, and then you get to that next page. You'll see that top right hand. It's reflecting how much of our rates are fixed versus floating, with the view that nearer term we will have it fixed, and the black lines give the range which we should be in. The fact that 2030 is a bit of whiteness under the black suggests we are not compliant, and Hayden's very, very quick to say, but we are. So thank you, Hayden. I'll take your word on that one, mate. Okay. Sorry, you want to say anything else?
Yes, so basically, yeah, we need to transact some interest rate swaps just to maintain coverage.
Yeah, you'll have to eventually, won't you?
Yes,
Because
yes.
as we carry on across it, yeah. And this is what you're obviously talking about with Brent today.
Yes, yes.
Brilliant. Okay, that's good. Otherwise, from a prudential limit perspective, so we've got interest rate risk covered. Our funding risk is okay. You've got the 10 million sitting to meet April. So we got our maturity spread out over the years, which is good. Liquidity is okay. And from an investment side, we're compliant with where we want to be. That's a good sign. Well done. Thank you. Any other questions from folk here? Craig, okay, let's go to the resolution, please, which is that we receive Hayden's report. We don't have to note a non-compliance, which otherwise I'd make us do. So that's great. Thanks, Hayden. Peter, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, John. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you. Debtors report, Hayden.
Okay. Through the chair, I'll take it. The report is read. Probably highlights just to give you is that we've still got 2 rates instalments to go. So we've got one coming up on the 15th of February and another one in May to come up. The other probably big point to note is we've seen a really big increase in the arrangements to pay that are being sort of organised with the team. So they're up 181 compared to 83 at June. So that's a significant increase. We've sent the remaining mortgagees out to the banks to collect on properties that have mortgages. So that's all about to go through. So we'll get all that money in. And then the other thing is that we're going to really step up our meetings around sundry debtors. So meet a lot more regularly with the remaining 5 months of the year to try and have a really good year-end finishing position. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Rates are rates. They go across the whole community. Is there any particular from the debtors list perspective when you're doing that? Is there sort of like the top 5 you can go after? That's a terrible phrase, but actually you need to have those sorts of discussions with.
Yes. So what happens is we have a monthly, which we've moved to fortnightly meeting, where we basically split rates and sundry debtors into 2 separate areas, and we list out the highest to lowest debtors and focus really on. There's a lot, so we tend to focus more on the higher ones and what action we're going to take. Are we going to go down? Are we looking at a rating sale? Is this an abandoned land situation? Have we done all the steps we can here? And that's sort of what we do in terms of the rates. And then similarly with the sundry debtors here, by value, they tend to be rated. And age, obviously.
Thank you.
Just a few questions here. First of all, just out of interest, why do we identify deferred rates as being uncollectible? Surely they're just deferred and they will be collected.
They're uncollectible until the property is sold, I guess. So we can't. They're postponed, right? They go onto the property until the property sort of sold.
Okay.
We can't really.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, we will collect them, but they're not collectible, I suppose, right now. Yeah.
Okay.
Balance sheet's carrying the cost.
Yeah.
That's why it's good to recognise it.
Sundry debtors, page 76. They seem very high. Sundry debtors. We've got 750,000 in 30-day and 90-day plus.
Yeah, they certainly have. They've increased since June from 665,000 to 780. So yeah, they have.
These are not rates. These are
things other like on the last page we've got like development contributions, resource consents, building consents, your licensing, your booking of halls, all of those sort of things. Yeah.
And why do we have a explanation as to why they've gone so high?
Probably well, one of the reasons is we've seen development contributions sort of rise a bit, and some of that's to do with consenting issues. So people when people are going through consent with development contributions, they don't tend to pay until they're sort of about to get their consent. So there's there's been a few issues there with those. In terms of the resource and building consents, probably just we just haven't had as good as collections as we previously had. Yeah. So that's again around that focus of like meeting every 2 weeks now to sort of try and get on top of
So it just feels to me like it's becoming more of a problem.
Peter, we've got Brian wanting to comment. He may well help your question.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, certainly with one of the things we see with resource consents in particular is that we can't hold releasing the consent for payment, whereas we can do that in the building space. And so quite often people will get their consent and then we have to follow up with either debt collection or like chasing up small amounts. But I would say in that 3 months plus, which is quite high, there are a number that the chair talked about that are that are risk. They're historic, they're large amounts, they're developers, so they're subdivision, and they're 100 plus that we're trying to get out. So that number would come down once we successfully targeted a small amount of individuals. And that's, I guess, why you see it so much different to building consents and licensing, because we can withhold releasing the document that they want until payments made.
Okay, so I think sorry, Peter, go for it.
And just finally, and I think once again it was because the last time, but just a bit more nuance around why. So what we're seeing is our debtors, our percentage of debtors increasing. So we've gone from 3, we're now at 5.9, and which is not a great trend. I think we talked last time, and I think it's in the minutes, about having a bit more nuance as to why people are not paying rates. And if we kind of a broad brush, we say, oh well, it's the economy, but I think the plan was to get some standardised responses so that we could actually analyse or think about why this is an increasing trend, because we don't want to back up at 10%, 12%.
Yeah, and so that's about with Judy's team putting in place notes around and standardising the reasoning that the reasons that ratepayers aren't paying, and Judy and her team have started to sort of work on that with some sort of standard reasons as to why people are saying they can't pay, and so that we can we can pull that data out and start actually looking at the reasons.
Yeah. Would you be optimistic that we might have a bit more nuanced understanding for the next debtors report?
I'll answer for you, Hayden. Thank you. Yes, please. As a start. I take it as a start. Let's just. Yeah. I think actually, Peter, your point's well made. Is that it is difficult times, but actually we need to understand perhaps a wee bit more why. So even if it comes as on a preliminary basis, and I suspect possibly even it needs to be PX, that would be helpful. Just as to understand a wee bit more around DC's resource and building consents, it may be that we need to consider a PX paper, but actually some nuance around that would be good. Yeah, you've got a.
I just wanted to say, I think what Hayden is saying is that we haven't historically or currently collected that data, and in Pathway or the systems when they're taking these calls, and there isn't. It's not as simple. There isn't a field that we can put in to collect that information that we can then easily report on. So it's going to be a bit of a work in progress to get that. It may be a change in, there might be an IT change that we have to do there. Otherwise, it's a very, very manual process to get you that information. And we've got to try and focus on efficiency of this as well. So what what's happening is we're going to try and see how we can collect that data and easily report on it. But at the moment, we can't do that, or we're not doing that.
So you're suggesting that Hayden should not be optimistic?
I think it's a work in progress, but I don't think we're there yet. Am I right, Hayden?
No, they are starting to collect it, but then again, as Donna was saying, we don't have in the notes they're starting to, but that's not an easy place to actually pull that out of. So it's a work in progress. So I wouldn't be very optimistic by the next meeting, and we need a bit of time to build up that data. I guess.
Could you just at the next meeting give us a progress report on how you're going with that?
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Hayden. Thanks. Terry.
I'm just supporting what's going discussion on here. This is really important. We had a lady this morning coming in, trying to earn money to pay rates. This is the other side of it. The numbers increasing. They want to pay it off over a period of time. This is a story that, in the highest demographic part of the country, it's not going to go away. So having a bit of an understanding of how that's rolling would be really helpful for us to see where we're going.
Yeah. Thanks, Hayden. Appreciate that. Thank you, Terry. Any other questions, comments? No. Can we move to the recommendations, please, which is that we receive the report. I'll move that. Thank you, John. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Right, we're into our meeting with the auditors. Carl, you've been sitting over there, and I see Anton too, who probably through a rather poor email from me has been sitting around there for a while. So we'll welcome Anton as well. But Carl, I'll let you, along with Peter, do the introductions, including Anton, who we can see so well by way of our screens here. So perhaps Peter, you first, then Carl, and we can move on.
Kia ora, thank you. So this is obviously following on from last year's annual report audit, and this is the report that Audit New Zealand provides to Council on the findings and recommendations. We have management responses to each of those recommendations, which you'll find in the report as well. So I'll just hand over to Carl.
Thank you, Chair. I think before we look into the past, let's look into the future. I'd like to introduce Anton Labuschagne, that's going to be taking over the role as appointed auditor from me. I've completed 6 years with Thames Coromandel District Council, and as per our policy, it's then time for us to roll off to prevent any independence issues. You're in very capable hands with Anton. He's been with our organisation for quite a while, and he's quite extensively involved in the local government sector. So he'll serve you well going forward.
Well, welcome to the meeting, Anton. Hopefully you can hear me. It's Bruce Robertson here. And I wonder if you just give a really quick snapshot of your background and, of course, the fact I think you're Taronga based.
Yes. Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. Yeah, sorry, I would love to have been there in person, but the was only formally approved towards the end of last week that I'll be the appointed auditor. And so I had quite a few meetings already booked this morning, so I just couldn't quite get there in time. So I've been with Audit New Zealand for about 15 and a bit years now. I've been a manager for the last 10 years and just been recently appointed as an associate director. I am based in Tauranga, as Bruce has said. So within local government, I think I've almost all councils in the Waikato Bay, plenty. I've had some involvement over the years, but just reflecting for some reason, I've just never been at Thames Coromandel. I don't know why, but thought they must have decided I needed some time here. But the Coromandel is a beautiful part of the country, so I am looking forward to coming out every now to meetings and when the team's on site.
Thanks, Anton. Appreciate that. While we've got a very fulsome report here, Carl, I think I just want to reflect the Auditor General's policy of rotation. And Anton, welcome into working with us here. He's been trained up well, by the way. I've met Anton at Bay Regional Council as well, so he's trained well. But actually, Anton, be very keen for the fresh set of eyes that you will bring, which is the intent, not of running you down, Carl, and far from it, but actually the benefit of a fresh pair of eyes. So welcome to it, and we'll be looking forward to your insights as you start to run the ruler across us through the work you do with the team. Carl, is it Nishant, our manager? He stays on this job with us. Is that right?
Chair, there's a possibility that he might also rotate. We're just looking at that in the background. So
you know what I'm asking here, just a wee
yes.
bit of concern
we
about,
will have the audit lead will be consistent.
Yeah. Look, I would hope, I mean, clearly at the next meeting, we must have Anton the arrangements letter so we can discuss that a wee bit further as we go on. So Carl, look, thank you for a very fulsome report with some insights. I suspect there may be some salient points you would like to raise with us. Is that correct? Or will I go straight to questions?
Chair, just I think for one or two issues, I think going forward, we raised a matter or a recommendation in section 4 of the report for revaluations. And I think we did that consistently throughout the sector on the unit rates used for revaluations. And I feel it's very important that, you know, while we get and we do these valuations, that we do track the costs of doing things against what the actual cost is that we're seeing in the community or for those similar sized councils around us, so that when we get a valuation, we can sense check that. TCDC does go through a process where they get the external valuer to, from time to time, periodically, to come in and do that kind of assessment, but it would be good to have that internal database as well available to council. One of the other matters that I just wanted to highlight, I mean, we've raised a lot of best practice guidelines, and the nature of the report is not to, we don't want TCDC to adhere to the gold standard. We raise matters with those charged with governments that we found that could be areas where controls could be approved, or where management and the council feels that we are happy with the controls we've got and we can mitigate some of these risks through other processes. And, you know, based on that, we could then look at closing some of these matters and carrying them forward as risk accepted by management. But it is our job as part of the audit process to do bring these internal control deficiencies to you as those charged with governance, so that you can note them and see what management's responded. And the other one is just when we talked about the performance measures for the year going forward, is one of the matters that we did find was the target for the renewal of roads was quite interesting to find last year. Yes, we did report it correctly in the annual report, but the long-term plan actually says we'll set those targets in the asset management plan, which is updated annually. The target was not in the asset management plan. We then had to go look at management records and where these targets were presented in terms of kilometers that we're going to resurface. And it's just when we set targets, we need to be clear up front. Where's that target? Where can I find it? And then how do I track according to that during the financial year? There are also some changes, Chair, coming through. I mean, obviously, for next year, we'll keep on a focus on healthy waters. There's a new audit standard that we'll share with management on the audit of service performance information, which also looks at that when we set targets, how clear is it to those that read those targets? You know, what are we measuring? How are we measuring it? And, you know, what will the outcomes be? And then also for the valuation cycle, there's a imminent change, or the guidelines, the APOPO guidelines for I had to go write that down. Infrastructure asset valuation and depreciation is due for a refresh, and I think the updated guidelines will be issued at the end of February. And the expectations is then that valuations will comply with these guidelines. So it would be good for management then just to test that with the valuers. Once you get that, have you complied with these new guidelines? Thank you, Chair. Then I'll take questions.
Thanks for that, Carl. So yes, I think there are a few questions. So Peter.
Carl, thanks for your comments around best practice. I sometimes have a perception that because you're auditors and you do have potentially there ends up being an imbalance of power with staff, because you're the auditors and you're the ones that are able to say, to give a qualified audit report, which none of us want, and whether I guess it's probably more of a question to staff, whether staff feel that when you're putting forward that this is best practice, the staff feel, oh, we kind of need to do that. Whereas we all know that best practice has a huge cost associated with it, and perhaps it might not be appropriate for us. So is there a question in there somewhere? Thank you, Donna.
I can probably comment. So from a staff perspective, like we aim to have obviously a very good relationship with our auditors and not get in a position of fear. It's kind of auditing has changed a bit in that respect, thankfully, over the years. But in saying that, whenever we a recommendation is made through audit, we don't just automatically accept that. There's, even with this management report, it's been in draft, it's been backwards and forwards a few times till we both parties, management and audit, are happy with the recommendations and are happy with what we say we're going to do or not going to do, because we always do weigh up the cost versus the benefit of some of these things. And audit has an obligation to inform of things that they've found. Doesn't necessarily mean that we have to adopt them. We can choose to accept a certain level of risk if we want to, if we don't think that the benefit's there versus the cost of actually correcting that. So yeah, there's a lot of work that goes on to get this report to this stage, and Carl, I think you would agree, would you, with that?
Yes, Chair. Through you, Chair. I would.
Yes, Terry.
Yes, I just want to say congratulations. I thought the report was very, very comprehensive, gave some really good comments, and I managed to balance that with the management comment to see how it fitted. And I thought some of the things that you've highlighted come out are strengthening the business, not weakening it. So appreciate what you've really done there. I thought it was a very good read, the best audit I've ever read since been this place. So I was very impressed with all the commentary and all the actions that you found and thought. And I think it's just going to make a better place. So I thought it was very good.
Thank you for that, Terry. Any other questions or points people like to make?
Yeah, can I just another one. You comment on page 89. We performed the following review of the valuation reports, and a whole lot of stuff there. And I just wondered, surely the people who provide these valuations do so not just for TCDC, but they do so for lots of other councils, and surely there would be just an overall view that New Zealand would form of the capability and the reliability of the report, of those valuations that are coming out, rather than having to go through the, what is it, eight checklists of just for us. Am I making sense there?
Through you, Chair. Yes, thank you. We do that at the start. So we do assess the competence of valuers, and then we work through. It's just because it's such a complex area, it's possible for faults to creep in terms of calculation, in terms of data, quantity, quality. If the incorrect data is provided to the valuer and they base the evaluations on that, you'd be omitting a substantial amount or value of assets in your valuation, or vice versa. When something is duplicated, it would inflate the cost. And we have, through the process, I'm not saying there has been times when there has been errors in valuation reports and things had to be corrected. But as part of the auditing standards, at the end of the day, we're the ones signing off on the audit report that we're happy with the values that are presented in that. So that's part of the process that we have to work through in terms of the audit standards.
I feel like I want to comment, but I feel like I don't know if I want to make it in public, Peter, but I will. There's a group of self-appointed audit chairs that meet from time to time, and we did meet with Audit New Zealand over the valuations, mainly because the level of work that you do these days, Carl and Anton, is clearly increasing, which is probably behind your point. There's a substantial cost to this. Now, admittedly, I was talking with our group. We're talking with the auditors, but I think there is some gains to be made, and we certainly encourage your colleagues on this one, Carl, for there to be a greater understanding between valuers and auditors as to what is required. I mean, I think there was a feeling that there was a non-alignment between valuers and the work that is required of auditors to provide an opinion. Now, that doesn't cut costs necessarily. It might, well, I guess hopefully it could actually make things more efficient, because what I sense at the moment, and I think the reason we had this discussion with Audit New Zealand, Carl, was actually that the auditors don't ever accept a valuer. Now, that's an extreme statement, but I just want to reflect that's why we had the discussion. And it becomes important that I think the auditing profession and the valuation profession get themselves aligned to minimise the people that pay the cost. So if I can add that to your point, don't hold your breath on a solution though, Peter. But there's a group that have been putting the oar in saying that this is the case. I do accept the fact, as you've indicated, Carl, you and Anton have to put your opinion on our accounts. There has to be a relevant level of work done. But I think behind it all, the professions could do a bit more to help us along the way. Okay, any other questions or points folk would like to make? Yes, Deli.
I just wanted to say thanks for your hard work, Carl, and welcome, Anton. Looking forward to working with you. The report has passed the Delhi test. So I've taught at tertiary level, and one of the things I was always trying to do was to make things palatable for my students. And some reports I look at and I don't, and I'm not saying it's anyone in this building, I just want to pull my hair out. And I really appreciate and hope, I'm sure Anton will continue in the same manner, of the way it's laid out, being very easy to go to a section and to be able to identify the main points, and also the section on what is still open, what is closed, and the management comments. I just found something that, sometimes you go, oh my God, this isn't my area of expertise, but this is very important to me as a governor. I need to understand this, and I really appreciated that report.
Thank you. That seems like a segue to a good way to move towards the motion. So I do wonder, Peter.
So just for the motion, one correction, the date of the report in the recommendation should be the 23rd of January, not the 24th.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Let me just find that.
78, page 78.
Yeah. Okay. Dated 24 January. Oh, should be what? It is 2025.
No, it should be the 23rd of January.
Oh, okay. Right. Brilliant. Okay. Stated the 23rd. Okay. Good. Thank you. Appreciate that. You'll move it, Len. Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Dali. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? It's carried. Look, just before you leave, Carl, thank you. As you say, 6 years of hard yards, and you've heard the comments from the committee about their appreciation for your work, and Anton, our keenness to work with you and carry on that into the new audit. I just want to say to you, Peter, thank you. I think there's an equal part to this report, Dali, that your comment on is so clear, is I got very clear understanding where management is at in terms of actually responding to those queries, which actually is good. And Donna, that does reflect the fact that you've had a pretty meaningful debate, because it seems like we've got an equal and sort of response out of management. So, Peter, to you as well, because I know reasonably new, well done as well. I'm glad that you got us to this process as well. I look forward to the changes that we've agreed to commit. So, Carl, you said you're leaving us to go to schools. I do wish you well. I do wish you well on schools. I think I'd rather be on Anton's shoes and come to do local authorities, but never mind. Anton, we look forward to seeing you, I'm sure, at our next meeting. And again, Carl, thank you. And I know you'll join us out the back when it gets to time for lunch. Anton, thank you for hanging around.
Thank you.
I wish you well for the rest of your day as well.
Thank you.
I'd like to take a quick moment to thank the elected members, thank the CE, Maya, yourself, Donna, team Hayden, Leslie, that I've worked with in the past. There's a lot of them to mention. I really enjoyed working with the council, and I look forward now to enjoy the beauty of Coromandel. The next time you see me, I'll be wearing jandals board shorts on the beach.
We might try and avoid that actually. Yeah. Thanks, Carl. Appreciate that, man. That's good. Can we move to page 118 of our, excuse me, our agenda, which is, I think, our final item, Cherie, if I got it right, which is the elected members' quarterly report. Really just important for our eyeballs to check about their reasonableness, etc. So, yeah, something to talk, Donna, any points you want to make?
Oh, thank you, Chair. Not really. I'll just take the report as read. This is just data that has been pulled from our finance system and collated by the team in a way that that shows the expenses over the second quarter of the financial year. So happy to take any comments or any questions.
Thanks, Donna. So I don't necessarily expect comment, but I mean, the critical thing here, although you're about to burst into song, Terry, I think the critical thing here is, does this meet our reasonableness eye? I mean, it's been approved. It's some cases it's been pre-approved for travel. So there are control processes in place. This really is the question about, is it overall reasonable? Are we happy with the settings of our expenditure? Terry?
I just want to make comment that I actually signed off the expenses for council on that, and they've been pretty coming through, no problems at all. We have extended out to those going to ratepayers meetings or something like that as they're representing there. So just to let you know that all's going well there, and thanks to Jenna and staff for what they do.
Thanks, Terry. Any other questions, comments folk would like to make? Yes, Robin.
I just wondered whether we could change the heading on one of those, because it says taxi, Uber, and could we add public transport? Because I believe that two of the things in that column are in fact public transport. I took the bus, Dally took the bus. It's really just a true reflection. I don't think you can get an Uber in Wellington for $4. So
good
Well
point.
done.
We can definitely change that.
Well, that's a good call. Well done. And the intent is superb. Right. I sense there are no further comments. Thank you for the report. Really important that we just keep our eyes on it, as I say. The recommendation is that we receive. I'm going to move that from the chair. Do I have a second? Thank you, Terry. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you very much. Righty, that gets me, I think, to the end of our meeting, which means, can I invite, do we have a closing karakia, Len?
We do.
Could I ask you and invite you to do that, please?
Not flash enough to be able to do it ahead, but we'll do this one. Yeah, thank you. Te whakapā e, te whakatā, te whakaetanga e, tēnei te kaupapa ka ea, tēnei te wānanga ka ea, te Māori te kaupapa, ka whakamoia, te Māori te wānanga, ka whakamoia, koa ki runga, koa ki raro, haumi e, hui e, tai e, na mihi.
Thank you, Ben. That's great. Yeah, the meeting's closed. I think there is a wee bit of lunch out the back. So I'd invite you to make certain you say your farewell. Carl, join us, please. That would be great. I just want to, I will come out later on, but I just got to